Hi, I'm Laura Fell, and welcome to the final instalment of my interview series talking mental health and creativity. This week, for our final episode, I'm joined by Hannah Boyle. Hannah is a Scottish writer and editor for Goldflake Paint, one of my favourite music journals, but also works in the third sector supporting women affected by homelessness. I hope you enjoy our conversation. So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask was just about early experiences of mental health, I suppose. So when you can first remember thinking maybe there's something going on here, or kind of maybe I'm struggling in this sense with mental health.
Yeah, it's been quite a long time. I think I first started struggling when I was a teenager. I had quite a difficult childhood, bit of a broken home, and my mum was a single mother and raised myself and my brother. Worked tirelessly to put food on the table. So I think I really struggled with my childhood when I was becoming an adolescent and sort of processing the things that I'd been through, which in turn, I started to experience really low moods and really bad anxiety. I had difficulty at school as well. I really found my place. So maybe about 15, 16, I started to get into these sort of really low episodes when I knew something wasn't right, and really isolating myself and really not able to pick myself up. So I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety around about that time. And, the last decade has just been me trying to figure out what that means to me now. I've gone on a bit of a journey with my own mental health, I would say, in the sense that sometimes it's I've managed to find some sort of stability and think that I'm okay, and then I'll reach these moments of crisis and remember that I've still not processed things. I've maybe not been in a place of safety to process what I've been through, I guess, and I think that's where I'm at right now. I think in terms of, I would say, mental health, I would always accept that I had problems, and depression and anxiety are huge things. They're not necessarily a problem, but it was presenting a lot of problems in my life. So I think I would always sort of tolerate them and pretend that I was okay, and just get on with life and kind of float by, just pushing everything under the surface. And I'm kind of getting to the stage now where I'm kind of slowly starting to open that up again, open that big box. And therapy is really helping me with that. I'm doing CBT just now.
In terms of what you were saying about kind of you just kind of carry on with things, was that kind of something that was that kind of your way of coping with it and getting through it? Was that because you felt the stigma around talking about those things that you were experiencing?
I think about both. I got really, really unwell when I was about 20, 21. I moved abroad to Canada, and came back a year or so later, and got really unwell, and luckily managed to take time out of employment, and my mum was really there for me through that, and sort of nursed me back to health to a point where I was able to think about my future and where I want to go, and potentially look at not living living with her forever. So I guess from that moment, things kind of turned around, and I managed to sort of piece myself back together a little bit. And I guess since that period in my life, I've always been scared to, I guess, sort of relapse back to that. Yeah. So I'll continuously just, almost float along and just kind of bury things and avoid things and ignore things. I guess maybe because I'm scared to admit that I was so unwell, and accept that I was so unwell and process that. But that's obviously, like I said, that's what I'm doing now, is I'm able to start, unpicking that. Yeah. And I think, like with the line of work that I do, and I support people with mental health issues and mental health illnesses, and you know, I need to be well enough to support them. I need to I can't help them if I can't help myself. So
well, self-care becomes so fundamental, doesn't it? And I can resonate with that with what I do. If I'm not doing things to look after myself, I'm not going to be able to do it. But it's funny, isn't it, how, you know, when it's for other people, it will be enough to make us do it. Whereas when it's just for us, it can still feel really quite challenging, can't it, to put those things in place. I think, I don't know how your experience maps onto this, but I think with my experience of mental illness, kind of especially around eating disorders, you know, I'd spent so long not actively not looking after my body, actively mistreating my body, that self-care, when I trained as a therapist, was this kind of, you know, quite simple concept to intellectually understand, but actually putting it into practice and kind of translating that into my day-to-day life took a long time, and it still has to be quite a conscious effort. Do you kind of similarly find the same?
Yeah, definitely. I think I have periods where I'm great, and I'm really in tune with that idea of self-care and mindfulness, and, you know, prioritizing the things that I enjoy, the things that I love, and finding the space and time for that. But then on the flip side, I'll have these moments where, you know, I guess these sort of low depressive episodes where I don't look after myself, and I don't listen to my mind, and I don't listen to my body, and I sort of burn myself out. So I think it's just about I'm learning to try and achieve that balance, or not a balance, but, you know, sort of do more self-care and ingrain it properly into my life daily. I think I'm good at, you know, I think we're all good at, you know, like you know, self-medicating, whether it be, you know, food or alcohol or the gym or, you know, anything that could possibly be detrimental to you in too much, and too much of a large quantity. And I think I'm learning what's self-medication and what's self-care, and they're both very, very different. So yeah, I think it's something that's so important, especially, you know, in the line of work that you and I do. You know, we have to look after ourselves, and be there for ourselves, and, you know, practice what you preach, which I'm so bad at doing. But, you know, I'll get there. I will get there.
And it's always infinitely easier to kind of say it and lay it out for someone else than it is to kind of actually live that advice ourselves, isn't it? It's always so much harder.
Definitely.
Hannah, do you mind kind of talking a little bit about the depression and the anxiety, kind of when they're in those kind of peaks, or when those kind of episodes come on, what that's like for you, or what that kind of looks like in terms of, you know, what you might start doing or stop doing, as it were?
So I guess, you know, I'll be very manic for a while, and I'll push everything down, and, you know, then I'll reach a point where everything becomes too much, and I'm not really living life. You know, I'm not really present. I'm just kind of going from one thing to the next, just trying to tick off boxes and get what needs to be done. And then it's when I actually stop and I have time to, I guess, think, or breathe or pause or relax or whatever. It's almost like everything sort of hits me. I'm giving myself that time, and then all of a sudden everything will kind of hit me, and I can get very, very low. And, you know, I sleep a lot. I find I sleep constantly when I'm in those kind of episodes. And, you know, I think I've experienced a lot of vicarious trauma in the work that I do, and we'll start to have sort of intrusive thoughts and things like that. And then anxiety, you know, just chest heavy, a sense of dread, you know, just feeling sick, things like that. And it can, you know, it can last a day, it can last a month, it can last a week. I never really know. I don't really have any control over that, I guess. I guess I do. I think sticking to a routine is fundamental for me. Because as soon as I give myself those moments to kind of stop, that's when I'll start everything will kind of flood in, and it'll get a bit much. So sticking to a routine and sticking to healthy coping techniques as well. You know, I've developed quite a lot of them with my therapist, like what works for me. And you know, when I got really unwell as a teenager, I was the first port of call. My doctor sent me to CBT group sessions, and you know, I laughed them off, and I was like, I wasn't ready for it then. And the irony is that now CBT is something that's, you know, helping me process everything and achieve like a really healthy life. So I would say that that helps me kind of lift myself out of those periods when I'll, you know, I'll have to make an appointment with my therapist, or you know, go through the different techniques and coping mechanisms that we've developed together. But it's not easy. It's not. It's hard. And I think I'll self-medicate with work. You know, like I'll just throw myself into work, and I'll eat, sleep, breathe, work, and then, you know, burn out really fast, which is not, it's not a healthy thing at all.
When you said about CBT and kind of, I guess, where you're at now with those coping mechanisms, but charting that back, when you said that when you were a teenager and they were offered, you weren't ready for them, could you say a bit more about what you mean by that, kind of not having been ready for it?
Yeah, I guess I didn't really understand what was going on with me at that point. You know, when I first went to the doctor years ago, I was prescribed medication, and that helped for a while, although I actually ended up getting much worse on one of the medications that I was taking. So we switched that, and then I went to the CBT sessions, and I guess I felt like I wasn't ready to sort of face or sort of process anything that I'd gone through. You know, the trauma that had caused me to possibly develop mental illnesses later in life, and the things that had shaped me and made me who I am. I don't think I'd really gotten to the stage where I was, you know, I was maybe mature enough, emotionally mature enough as well, to understand those things. So I think I was just feeling everything so intensely. Also being a teenager as well, you know, your hormones are everywhere. they're all up and down, and also struggling with, you know, I was very lonely as a child and as a teenager. I didn't have many people in my life, and you know, I felt really isolated. So yeah, I guess it just kind of engulfed me, you know.
Yeah, almost too much all at once was going on to sit with any of it.
I think so. And it's a shame because, you know, maybe a couple of years down the line I would have been ready. But I'm so grateful that I was offered that as an intervention. I didn't have the best time with community mental health teams. I don't know what you call them. I think, is it the same in England? Yeah. I didn't have the best time with them, but with my own GP, I could say he was a lifesaver. He did incredible things for me at that time.
Well, because that was another thing that I was curious about, because I know that everyone can have very different experiences of what it's like when you come to ask for help, and getting to that place in itself is a hugely difficult thing to do. And I wondered, you know, what your journey was then after that point. So you had that intervention, and kind of between there and where you are now, what's that been like for you, engaging with mental health services, or even kind of just talking with friends about kind of what's going on? Because I guess there is this real stigma, and I think a lot of the time I hear awful stories about people going to the GP and kind of not being taken seriously, or not being given the time or the adequate referrals.
Yeah. Well, I was really lucky that I had the GP I did, and I might have had a very different story had he not been there and provided the interventions that I needed. But I do remember having a really negative experience with the community mental health team when I got really unwell, and it really knocked me for six. You know, I ended up actually pursuing a complaint because I felt I was really suicidal, and I went to them, and I needed help, and I felt was kind of patronised and told to download some, you know, apps like mobile phone resources, and I just felt like, you know, like nobody's listening to me. I'm crying out for help, and no one wants to help or listen. So I found that really difficult, and pursued, a complaint, because I felt if I hadn't had the support network around me at that time to sort of pick me up after that negative experience, if I'd have been someone else, I would have hated to know, how that person would feel after that experience. And I'm lucky I had the strength and resilience to sort of pick myself up and my family around me. But you know what, I think from then I've kind of just stayed staying stable on my medication, and not really engaged with services. I think that probably did put me off a little bit until very recently, when I moved to a new town and joined the GP, and the first thing they said to me was, "We have a CBT therapist in the house. Would you like to access that service?" And I was really taken aback by that, because when I lived in Glasgow in a city centre, the waiting list for services was ridiculous for any sort of therapy.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people and myself ended up going private, but was something that I personally couldn't sustain financially. And a lot of my friends and the people around me can't sustain it financially. So I was really lucky when I came here to be offered that, and it's free on the NHS. But I know that it's not the same for everyone. The people that I support in my day-to-day role are ignored by the GP, face so much discrimination because they don't look a certain way, they don't present a certain way. But if it was you or I, they would potentially be spoken to and treated differently. So I find that really, really hard, because I not acknowledge like the level of privilege that I have to be able to be listened to, but they can't. And I guess like that, those experiences just help me, just give me more sort of fuel and passion to advocate for them, and have their voices heard. But it's not easy. I mean, I think the state of the mental health services in our country is not. It's I know that there's good experiences, but I hear and see and witness a lot of bad. I've just been really, really lucky, in my own sort of journey with my mental health. That besides that one really negative experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I mean, I hear what you're saying as well about kind of the discrimination. Kind of, I remember that when I was doing my support work role, and kind of people just not being taken seriously, or kind of not being offered things, or if there was a substance abuse problem, that would be what was centered in on, rather than kind of everything else going on. But I guess that feels linked to me to, I guess, the wider stigma around mental health. And I know when you were talking before, you were talking about you would push things down, and maybe that was a way of coping with it, but also kind of not wanting to talk about things. So have you felt aware of that stigma of, this isn't something to talk about, or, that idea that we might have in our heads that, to do so would be burdening someone, or, all of those kind of unhelpful inner narratives?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as well, being Scottish and Glaswegian especially, being brought up in a Glaswegian family, you're kind of, it's ingrained in you to kind of bury things deep and not to ask for help or not to talk about when you're struggling. It's sort of unheard of. It's changing, obviously, it's changing with society now, and people focusing on how we have to listen to our children, we have to listen to people when they're asking for help. But I think I, especially with the work that I do, it's so easy to just put everything else on the back burner and focus on someone else, instead of actually focusing on yourself. When like we're saying, you have to be well within yourself to help other people. But I think for me it's really easy, and for a lot of people, I think we all do it, don't we? We wander through life, and we can push down things that we find that we might struggle to talk about, or maybe struggle with others' reactions towards those things that we don't want to disclose. Or I think it's so easy to present yourself as someone that's got everything together, and especially in the age of social media. And
it's almost expected that that's the side that you present, and it's this idea of that's the socially acceptable side, or the side that gets likes, or the side that gets the praise, or
when in reality, that's not you. it's one side of you, it's one part of you, but it's not the whole picture. I think we're slowly moving towards I guess a more accepting society where we kind of do, are you okay? Like, if we're asking how are you, it's like, well, are you really? We're looking a bit underneath the surface. We're not just taking the first answer.
Asking the extra question.
And I think that's something that's been really good from lockdown and the pandemic, is that we are more in tune, I guess, or we're trying to be more in tune with how others are feeling, and sort of notice when people are struggling more. Whereas maybe before, it was sort of just normal for you to just carry on and just stay strong and get your head down. And I think now people are actually realizing it's not sustainable, especially in my line of work. It's not sustainable. We need to be there for each other. We need to take time out when we need time out, and not just work ourselves to the bone. I think so.
I mean, in terms of lockdown, I wanted to also ask kind of how the lockdowns have impacted on kind of the mental health issues that you kind of live with day to day around depression and anxiety, and how it seems like they kind of will come back episodically from what you're saying. Is that something that lockdown brought on, or did you have quite a different experience? I know some people have said that it kind of meant that they could retreat and kind of just be in that space that they needed to be in. What was your experience?
I threw myself into work, first and foremost, but also I did isolate myself. I did retreat back into what I knew, what I found safe. Having the excuse, or we didn't need an excuse to not be sociable. I'm not great. I'm a terrible one for making plans well in advance, or even next week, and then it gets to the day before and I'm dreading going, and I'll make an excuse to try and get out of it and not actually be honest and be like, look, I'm really struggling. So that was all taken away from me. I had no control over that. I just didn't have to see anyone, which was really, I guess, was good at the time. But I'm feeling the after effects of that coming out of lockdown and starting to be sociable with friends again, and people I care about, and I'm finding it tough. I know we all are. We're finding it tough how to be sociable again, and sort of speak to each other. I was talking about the same things for a year and a half, especially like in terms of my work, and I just threw myself into that. But now, I think everything else is opening up again, and I'm having to sort of cope with that. That there's lots of life that I was kind of, just like I was said before, was kind of ignoring and avoiding, and it kind of gave me the opportunity to. So I guess I'll have to deal with that as time goes on.
Sure. But do you think that kind of as things are opening back up again and you're now confronted with more of those instances where you might commit to a plan and then really not feel up to it, are you increasingly feeling more able to communicate that honestly and kind of say, look, I'm really sorry, I'm just not in the place to do this, or can we postpone? Or
definitely. And I think that there's a lot more understanding now, especially with people that I surround myself with, that we do appreciate that with each other, and we just really want to be there for each other. Whereas maybe before, I mean, it could have been my insecurities. Like if I'd have said before, I'm really struggling, my mental health is poor today, I don't think I would have been met with a negative response or reaction. But maybe I just feel more comfortable now to actually be honest and transparent about what's going on with me. And I think as like societally, we're moving towards that, not fast enough, but it's happening.
But it is happening. And I think, the pandemic, perhaps not as much as I would have liked or expected, but I think certainly the pandemic has kind of sped that up. I think that now, even as stuff's opening back up, as you say, there's this kind of fear, associated with connection, which is such an important part of daily life, isn't it? And I guess it's kind of, we can do these things now, but part of you is thinking, is it okay that we're here? And I think so much adjustment was needed to go into lockdown in the way that we did. I think the same is going to happen the other way around. And
definitely.
It's also intense. It all feels so much more intense than before, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned therapy, but I wanted to ask a bit more about kind of what helps. So for you, when you feel kind of a low mood coming on, or depression coming on, or your anxiety spiking, kind of what you kind of call on now in terms of those coping techniques you mentioned?
I guess so. It really helps for me to stick to a routine. That's a huge thing. Planning ahead, actually using a calendar and knowing what my steps are, my movements are for a certain period of time, be it a couple of days or a week. But the biggest thing, and I guess everyone can probably resonate with this, is nature, getting myself out. I used to, I'm getting better at not isolating myself and not staying in bed and not sitting on the couch or wherever, and just trying to get through the day as quickly as possible. I'm getting better at getting myself out the door and actually going for a walk. And the best thing that I ever did was get a dog. So I got a wee dog a couple of months ago, and he's been incredible for just, I don't have a choice, don't have an excuse. I have to get out every day, multiple times a day. And it's been the best thing. But just really, I think being mindful of being present, if that makes sense. So quite often I'm just getting myself from A to B. I've got my headphones in, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm listening to something to keep my mind ticking over, so I don't have to think about, maybe different things that are going on at that time. And I'm learning slowly to go for a walk and not take my phone, which has been something that I've been practicing a lot, and not listen to music, and just really listen to the sounds around me and be mindful to what's going on, and the bird song, and I live by the water, so the sea, so things like that. Just really trying to be present and ground myself. And trying to write as well, which is something that always takes, always goes on the back burner when I feel so low. I get such a creative block, and it makes me feel so, I get really, really bad imposter syndrome, and feel like, I'm not a writer, I'm not worthy of anything. I shouldn't be writing, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't call myself a writer. And I think, so trying to find moments and appreciate moments when I can write. So just, if it comes to me, just take the time, just sit and enjoy it while it's happening, as opposed to trying to force it out when I am in one of those sort of low moods, or coming into that. Because that creative block, it's such a dark shadow, like it just hangs over me.
And is that always been the case in terms of kind of how mental health has impacted creativity? You've always kind of felt that it brings this creative block?
Yeah, definitely. I used to find, I still do find that, those moments of, it almost comes in like a flurry, when I do feel like I am able to create something that, I do have faith in, and I trust can be developed into a larger piece or whatever. It will come on really suddenly, and I just have to sort of embrace that. I can write when I'm sort of in that block, but it's never my best work, I would say. I know you're always your own harshest critic, but the more I just like sort of am present and just let it come to me, the easier it is, I would say. But it's tough. I think my relationship with writing is a hard one. I still don't feel like I can call myself a writer.
What do you think would need to happen for you
I don't know. I really don't know.
Mm.
I don't know. I guess it's hard. It's something I wanted to do from the youngest age. I was constantly reading. Like my dad would take me to football games and I'd take a book. I'd be sitting reading a book at a football match. But I wanted to be a writer my whole life, and then I am writing and being published. And yeah, I think just need to have more faith in myself.
That imposter syndrome is kind of a horrible thing. I remember it's like feeling a similar thing. Kind of, I can't call myself a musician, you know, all these people have been trained and I haven't done that. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe if I make a record, then I can call myself it. And then I make the record, like, oh yeah, but I still haven't done this or done, you know, and it's kind of like this demon kind of pulling at your shirt sleeve, isn't it? Where actually it's kind of everything else is saying, well, you are, you know, you're there. You know?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know what, honestly, I can't answer that. I don't know what will take that away.
Yeah.
Hopefully someday I'll feel worthy of that title.
But I think, you know, maybe that is what it comes back to, right? It's kind of self-worth and kind of, you know, how I guess our relationship with ourselves and our self-esteem dictates. It's like the camera lens that we look at the world through, right? So it kind of dictates our relationship with everything and everyone else, really, doesn't it? And I guess people can be praising us like, oh, this is great, or I love this piece that you've written, kind of, but you know, inner critic can be, and they're going, oh, but you know, oh, but this.
Yeah, and it's funny because, you know, sometimes I'll sit and I'll give myself some time to actually read something I've written, and I'll really enjoy it. Other times not so much, but you know, I'll read that and I'll be like, wow, like that's really good. You should be proud of yourself. But you're right, it just comes down to, you know, beating yourself up when you don't feel worthy enough. And which is something I've struggled with for a long time.
But I guess maybe it's just making room for a more compassionate voice within that. And I guess thinking of kind of like CBT type stuff around reframing, you know, it's almost like you have two speakers, and if the critic's coming out of one, at least put something more compassionate through the other one. So if you can't turn that voice off, at least you can kind of drown it out with, oh, but I did this really well, or this went well today, or this week, or.
Yeah. And something that's really helped me is with my therapist is talking about fact and opinion. So, you know, it's a fact me feeling like I'm not a writer, well, it's a fact that I have written and I've been published as a writer. So, you know, is it my opinion that's making me feel that way? So you're right, just sort of trying to reframe it so that your brain isn't so negative all the time, which is what mine is. It's always constantly like that little parrot on your shoulder, just sort of speaking negative things at you. So I'm trying to be more positive in everything, you know. I never was really one for positive affirmations, but they do help.
Yeah.
So if you when you were saying about coping techniques, I guess that's probably one as well. And trying to, you know, just trying to sort of reframe my thoughts when I can.
Yeah. To like, what would be an example of that where you might use reframing?
So I guess I'm huge at sort of dramatizing things. So, you know, in the support worker role, you have a lot of responsibility over and care for another individual. So I guess if something bad were to happen to an individual, I would internalize that. I would take that on board. I would be like, that's my fault. I should have done more. I should have been there for that person. I should have done this, that, and the other. When actually, if I sit and think about it, you know, what would I tell you if you were saying those things? I would tell you that you'd done all you could. You're only human. You can only do so much. And I mean, you probably made such a positive impact on that person's life already. So I guess thinking of things in that kind of way. And it just comes back to that compassion again. You know, I've got so much empathy and compassion and care for others, but like very little for myself.
Yeah. And I guess doing that kind of, what would you say to someone else, kind of forces you to confront, you know, that you're living by completely different rules and completely different expectations than you put on other people. And the compassion thing, you know, thinking about that parrot on the shoulder, I guess you know, it's almost kind of not seeing that as a part to kind of attack or fight with, but a wounded part to look after, you know, of kind of like, it's okay, you don't need to think that, I don't need to listen to that, to nurture. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, in my head, I always have to attribute things to things. So I have to be like, why am I feeling that way? When I just accept it for what it is, and I don't try and look into, you know, I have this emotion on this day because this happened to me. When I actually just start to just accept it and think, okay, it is what it is. I feel this way, and what am I going to do about it? You know, am I going to keep sinking further into that low depressive episode, or am I going to try and lift myself up and just accept that today's a write-off and tomorrow's going to be better. And I'm trying to do that more and more, because you know, I always look for explanations and things, to sort of justify why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, when in reality it's just about acceptance for me, you know.
That's really important, I guess. You know, that idea of the why isn't always necessary. You know, you don't need to know why to look after yourself in that moment. And I guess it's almost the why continues the rumination and the catastrophizing, doesn't it? It's almost like, okay, let's just pause here. Like, what am I feeling? How do I look after the feeling? How do I pull myself up from out of the rabbit hole, as it were? Yeah. I mean, going back to the writing briefly, I know you say that it's always been a space that's had a block when you've been struggling. Has it ever acted as a space to kind of process things further down the line for you in terms of writing about?
I do find it really cathartic. You know, when, like I'm saying, when I get that sort of floody and it just, I sort of embrace it and it just pours out. I find that really, really cathartic. And I have, you know, I've tried to write about my own experiences and, you know, my journey with mental health. And I just, maybe I'm not quite there yet, but it's something that I would like to explore someday when I'm ready. I think I'm still in that process of being comfortable with where I am and how I've got here and what's shaped me and what's defined me and the things that I've experienced in my life. And I'm still not quite there yet. But once I am, I feel like I'll be ready to write about it.
But I think, you know, just as we're talking, it feels really important that you seem very tuned into kind of where you're at and meeting yourself where you're at, and that feels important as well. Kind of knowing what, you know, what you're ready for, what you're not. Kind of, it comes back to those ideas of acceptance and compassion.
But that ties so much into the work that I do as a support worker. You know, it's about harm reduction in all sense of the word. The words, you know, it's meeting someone where they're at and walking alongside them, as opposed to trying to tell them where they need to be. And I guess that's what I'm learning, is how to not put too much pressure on myself and not tell myself this is where I need to be, this is what I need to do. I just need to, you know, take it slow and learn how to live a bit more slowly and not put so much pressure on myself, and be kinder and more gentle with yourself as well. I think that's something I'm trying hard to do.
Yeah, learning to direct some of that empathy, as you say, that you have so much of for other people, inwards more.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you, kind of, you know, being kinder to yourself? Is it kind of what you were talking about with reframing and kind of the way that you talk to yourself, or is that self-care? Is it all of those?
Yeah, it's all of those, I would say. And you know, not letting myself go down that rabbit hole of thoughts and negative thoughts and emotions and anxiety, you know, not feeding into that. But also, you know, being good to my body as well, eating well, sleeping well, exercising, just trying to do things, trying to listen to my mind, trying to listen to my body and feel more present and more grounded. And because I think I can so easily just sort of float through and avoid everything that I'm finding is too much pressure at any moment, and just kind of get by. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to live that way. You know, I'm missing so much. and I do feel like I'm getting to the stage where I'm able to be more grounded and present.
It's great to hear.
Yeah, it's taken a while. It's taken a while, but I moved out to myself and my partner. We moved out to a sort of rural town, a more rural town than Glasgow. Obviously, Glasgow's a big, massive city, but we were in a top floor tenement flat, and you know, it just felt crowded and claustrophobic. And we both love nature, and every day we were trying to get out and about, and it just felt counterintuitive. We were like, why don't we move to the country and visit the city? And it's been the best thing I ever did. I feel more at home here. It's a lot more peaceful and calm, and that's helping me a lot. And I would say in my recovery, just to surround myself with a positive, calming environment.
So you can kind of have that as the foundation and access the hustle bustle if you want it, rather than have that as something you need to run away from.
Exactly. I did feel so much more isolated when I was in the city. I know lots of people say this, but a lot of my family were like, are you not going to miss being in and about the city and the hustle and bustle? And I was like, no, I actually felt much more isolated when I was there. I didn't reach out to people as much as I do now, because I'm sort of forced to.
With where you feel you're at now and your journey with it all, kind of what you would recommend or advise for people who might be watching this that are struggling and not knowing where to start, or perhaps not having reached out yet, be it to a GP, to a family member, to a friend, kind of what you might say, or even what you might say to the teen you now, you know?
Yeah. Be kind to yourself is the biggest thing. And that's so hard. I'm still working on that. I think do things that you enjoy, that you get something from, no matter how small it is, and find those things. Actively seek them out. So, listen to your mind and your body, and go for a walk, and go and be in nature. And yeah, don't isolate yourself either. I think it's so easy. We do it all the time. When things get tough, we knuckle down and we go quiet and we go silent. And I think the best thing that you can do is have people around you that you trust and that support you. I know that if I hadn't had my mother and my cousin, who's like a sister to me at that time when I was really, really unwell, things might not have turned out the same way. And I think just having those people that can advocate for you if you need that as well, and being able to trust them to look out for you and support you. It's tough. It's tough, but you'll get there. And don't suffer alone. Don't suffer alone.
Because I think it can, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think that isolation, that withdrawal can often come from a shame place, kind of, I need to carry on, or I might be judged, or other people don't feel this way. And it's that tricky thing that until you kind of put it out there and speak to someone and have an experience that rewrites that narrative, it can build and build and build and get stronger and more sedimented,
Of course.
But it's not shameful,
It's not shameful at all.
It's human to struggle.
Of course, and I think that was the biggest thing for me as well, is I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to appear like I'd failed for my family and for the pressures of what was going on in my life at that time. But you've not failed. It's you're right. It's human. We experience things in so many different ways, and especially as well, if you've experienced extreme trauma in any point in your life and not had that sort of support network to pick you up and support you and carry you forward, I think it can snowball. It can build up and then it can all snowball. And I think just having people there for you, or being able to talk to people that care about you is the best thing that I did. It's tough. It was really tough. Even actually, I'm kind of going back into that just now and thinking about it. It was really tough, but I know that I wouldn't be here today had I not had that and shared and accepted that I wasn't weak. and that I didn't have to be embarrassed and that it wasn't shameful. I just had to admit I was struggling and it was okay. I think in society we're so scared to fail, but we need to stop seeing like us struggling as a failure. It's not at all.
Well, it's how we define these things, isn't it? And kind of, I guess you can define like vulnerability, right? Talking to someone about your, or needing to ask for help. People can have a very punitive definition that that's something that's bad and weak, but you can also flip that. And how I would define that is there's kind of, it takes courage and strength to reach out and
you are.
Yeah, when we take in, I guess, these definitions that we're brought up with or that we're given and we internalize them, but it's kind of, you can do a revised edition of that book that you get given and internalize. And it's kind of, I guess that's an interesting thing as well, isn't it? I remember realizing, oh, hang on, I get to decide what I kind of class as failing or what kind of coping looks like, or
definitely. It's not what you've been given to you by your family or what society expects of you. It's your choice, it's your journey. Definitely. Thank you so much. That was really lovely.
Oh, thank you for being a part of it. I really appreciate it.